Russia to take Pokrovsk and the rest of the Donbas would take 4 years and 2 million Russian casualties. Yeah, I do absolutely agree with the CGS of the Ukraine military. We need to sort of step back and look back a little bit. This Pokrovsk area has been fought over for the last sort of probably 18 months at least. And Russia has really thrown the kitchen sink at it. They have put so much effort into Pokrovsk and have been telling us literally for the last 18 months, they're going to take the place the next week. And all this time forward, Russia has sort of crept forward almost in sort of Blackadder type parlance. You know, they are taking meters of ground at a time at a very slow rate. And when you look at the casualties, are quite unbelievable. It was thought that over 180,000 Russian soldiers were focused in this area during the summer. And the latest UK MOD intelligence updates have been saying that the Russians are losing 1,000 people a day in this area. So that force, the last I heard, that force was down to about 100,000. So, you know, over the last few months, the Russians have lost potentially 80,000 troops in this area and have gained meters rather than kilometers. So I think the assessment is absolutely fair. I also go back to the UK intelligence update, which is, I think, regarded around the world as being, you know, straight down the middle and very well informed. They said about a month ago that their assessment would be for Russia to take Pokrovsk and the rest of the Donbas would take 4 years and 2 million Russian casualties. And all that we've seen in the last few weeks sort of backs up that assessment. I would say it's on the back of some very fierce and determined Russian disinformation and propaganda. If people only watched and listened to Russian media channels on X and Instagram and Telegram, they might well come to the conclusion that the Donbass was about to fall, but that this is complete rubbish and unsubstantiated. But it has been a key element to really the Russians, I say negotiations, but the Russians' stance and the whole peace plan that we're all talking about at the moment. So I think people need to understand, you know, there has been a lot of fighting in this area, a lot of casualties, mainly on the Russian side, a greater proportion. And the amount of ground taken is not strategically important. They might have made some tactical gains at the very lowest level, but I agree with the chief of the general staff in Kyiv that, yeah, this is not about to fall. And politicians around the world, particularly in Washington and Moscow and London, should not make decisions on the basis that Ukraine is collapsing in the Donbass. Fighting in built-up areas or fighting in urban areas is the most difficult fighting you can do. It absorbs an incredible amount of military personnel, ordnance, you know, ammunition, tanks, etc., etc. One only has to look back to Stalingrad in the Second World War, millions of casualties, months and months of most incredible fighting. My own experience in Syria, in Aleppo, in northeast Syria or sort of northeast west part of Syria, the Russians and the Syrians attacked Aleppo, admittedly a town rather larger than Pokrovsk, for 4 years conventionally and really got nowhere. And that's the same that we're seeing in Pokrovsk. It is incredibly difficult. This is really, it's not medieval fighting, but it's the sort of fighting we saw extensively in the Second World War. It's so difficult to maintain, and particularly as we're seeing here, if the Russians take a street, the Ukrainians counterattack and take it back again. Now, a lot of people are saying Pokrovsk is such a key place. Well, it is. It is because we in the media have been talking about it so concentratedly for the last year or so, and putting it on a pedestal that maybe it should, maybe it shouldn't be. You know, a lot of people will tell you if Pokrovsk falls, then that whole defensive belt will crack, and the Russians are a short hop to Kyiv. Well, that's not quite true. this is a key element to the defensive belt that the Ukrainians have built up here. But behind Petros, there are other key strongholds. So absolutely, I think mainly for psychological reasons, Ukraine wants to hold on to Petrovsk because it is a name of a city that resonates around the world. But actually, it's not quite as critically important as perhaps the Russians would have you believe. But fighting in this sort of ground is incredibly difficult. It's much easier on the open plains of Ukraine with tanks moving at great speed, supported by artillery and attack helicopters and attack drones. It's a very, very different issue when you're in the built up areas. And actually, when people see pictures of Petros now, you see it's sort of razed to the ground. And actually, that makes it even more difficult. Again, as I saw in Aleppo in Syria, and actually my own experiences in Iraq and Afghanistan, once there is rubble about, it's very difficult to fight in it because people can easily hide and move. So it is the most demanding fighting, most horrific type of fighting. And as we've seen in Petrovsk, it is killing people at an industrial scale. It's absolutely shocking, which is why everybody who has any experience of this sort of thing is trying to get an immediate ceasefire and a just peace deal for Ukraine. It's no accident that Ukraine has put a lot of special forces into this area and is bolstering it up because it's if Petros did fall, Russia, I'm sure, would make great capital out of it and say, well, the rest of the Donbas is going to fall. The key part of any peace deal we want to do is to take control of the Donbas. But I think what Ukraine is showing and what the Chief of the General Staff is saying, this is not going to fall. We are not about to capitulate in the Donbas in any way at all. And hopefully, if Western leaders, particularly President Trump, can realize this, then he can go and negotiate on that basis, telling Putin that it's going to cost him 2 million more men if he takes the Donbass. So if he has any moral component to him, he should sue for a ceasefire and peace now. And the fact that we are all around the world talking about the 28-point peace plan, the 24-point peace plan, I think we're down to 19 at the moment, and Petrovsk is pretty central to that. That is why it is so important that Ukraine holds Petrovsk, which they look as they're doing. And it's very important that commentators like myself make sure that people understand that's the case, because ultimately Ukraine is the country that was attacked. Russia is the aggressor. It shouldn't be rewarded for all the evils that it's done and the war crimes that it's committed. And let's not forget, Putin is an indicted war criminal. The International Criminal Court have issued an arrest warrant for him for stealing thousands of children out of Ukraine. This is the person that is central to these peace deals. So Petrovsk is key. And as it's been held, that's the way it should stay. And I think it will be very key to these peace negotiations. And we're all hoping that President Trump can make sure that Putin understands that and get this ceasefire and a just peace deal for Ukraine as soon as possible.